Tucker Carlson recently aired a segment about the shifting demographics in America.
A recent piece in National Geographic tells you a lot about demographics in America and about how bewilderingly fast they're changing without any real public debate on the subject.
Tucker, what do you mean by without public debate? Some Hispanic families want to move into your city, so you have a town hall meeting about it? Are you the racist town in Blazing Saddles? Are you a racist town? Sorry, continue.
In the year 2000, Hazleton's population was 2% Hispanic. Just 16 years later, Hazleton is majority Hispanic. That's a lot of change. People who grew up in Hazleton return to find out they can't communicate with the people who now live there.
Okay, so people return to Hazleton and can't communicate with people that live there now because Hispanics are the majority. But majority could be anywhere between 50.1% and 99.9%. And I thought it was weird how he didn't specify. But if I'm being honest, I didn't have time to find the National Geographic Tucker's talking about, but only because he didn't show the article or say what issue it was from. But I did find that the majority he's referring to is 52%. Okay, so Tucker, go on.
Now, before you start calling anyone bigoted, consider and be honest, how would you feel if that happened in your neighborhood? It doesn't matter how nice the immigrants are. They probably are nice. Most immigrants are nice. That's not the point.
Now, Tucker, you say don't rush to call you a bigot. You say most immigrants are nice, but you say that so you can say bigoted things. I'm not bigoted, I think most immigrants are nice. Except a simple web crawler search would discover your video from 2 months ago about how immigrants are more violent and commit more crimes than non-immigrants. It is 11 minutes longer than the segment where you say you're not bigoted and also most immigrants are nice. Anyway, in this other video, after first casually saying that Democrats need illegal immigrants here for votes, he claimed that Democrats are now saying this.
Illegal immigrants are terrific people, every single one of them, far more noble and law-abiding than you are. How dare you complain about their presence? You must be a bigot.
First of all, okay, Tucker. Second of all, what you're actually talking about is Democrats saying that Dreamers should stay because they're not criminals. It's literally a requirement of DACA. But, sorry, go on.
The one problem with this line of argument is that it's vulnerable to facts. We've got the data now, and it turns out, surprise, surprise, they've been lying to you.
Except then, Tucker, you give some statistics about Arizona, and again, you don't put anything on the screen of where that study came from. But it seems to be from a study by John Lott from the Conservative Crime Prevention Research Center, a study which has been called into question, a study that's only about Arizona, and a study that is notably an outlier. So, despite all of the evidence showing immigrants don't commit more crimes than non-immigrants, Tucker, sure, most immigrants aren't nice. Go on.
And that's just in one state.
Yeah, of course it's in just one state, because it's the only state mentioned in the only study you could find that would let you spend the next 10 minutes talking about how immigrants are criminals and diversity is bad. Oh, you have more. I'm sorry.
And that's just in one state. In California, an illegal alien named Luis Brasamontes.
Oh, it's just one dude? You're citing an outlier study that's methods have been called into question and one dude from California? Cool, man. Real good. The point is, in your other video, when you say,
most immigrants are nice,
you don't really believe it, and you're only saying it so you sound less bigoty when you complain about immigrants. But sorry, that was my point. You're talking about this town's influx of Hispanic immigrants. What's your point?
Most immigrants are nice. That's not the point. The point is, this is more change than human beings are designed to digest.
I'm sorry. What are you talking about, Tucker Carlson? More change than human beings are designed to digest? Where did you hear that? Who told you that? What are you talking about? We went to the moon. Shut up, Tucker. You think human beings aren't designed to handle change, or migration, or learning languages, or adapting to our environments, or meeting people? This is more change than human beings are designed to digest. You made that up, Tucker. You made it up. You fucking clod. Anyway, this concludes our one-time segment that we like to call, so I guess just maybe cool it on the white supremacist stuff, Tucker. Yes, that is what it is. And I did find the article, and I read it, and you definitely stopped reading after the 7th paragraph when they mentioned the demographic shift. Tucker. It's 66 paragraphs, Tucker, and you only read 7 of them. One of them later on reads, while the angst over the coming demographic shift might make for more uncomfortable race relations, it might finally usher in a reckoning in which America faces hard truths. The founding fathers built white dominance into the fabric and laws of the nation, and a country that proclaims to love freedom and liberty is still struggling with its roots in the original sin of slavery. Tucker. Didn't your show get canceled after a guest went on your show and just described your show to you? You'd think with all that spare time, you could have actually read past the 7th paragraph of the 66 paragraph article, which I know you didn't do because in your clip, you mentioned how people returning to Hazleton can't communicate with people when they return. Except the only mention of people returning to Hazleton is in the 3rd paragraph, where a woman talks about a yearly festival and how lately she doesn't want to go because she feels like a minority. And sorry to say, Tucker, the only mentions of communication in the article were past where you read in the 53rd paragraph where a bartender talks about warming up to learning Spanish, and in the 14th paragraph about how in 2010 Hazleton's mayor at the time tried to pass an anti-immigration law that also would have made English the official language of the town, but it didn't pass because it violated US law. Also, that guy's a congressman now. Tucker, you f***ing craven dunce. Please have a guest on your show describe your show to you again. Anyway, this concludes that segment called That. Hey Tucker, another recent piece in National Geographic? Why do we see so many things as us versus them? And the article you reference talked a lot about how, just as historically Anglo-Saxons were seen as true American compared to Irish, Greek, or Jewish immigrants, white Americans are seen as more American than others. And speaking of facts, let's say at that event, Charlie Kirk feels like immigrants commit more crime than non-immigrants. So he says that. And during the Q&A, someone accuses him of lying. So he says, lie.
Name one. Name one.
You said.
And the person points out that he only cited a single study from Arizona that's actually an outlier on this topic. And all other studies and FBI data indicate that immigrants, illegal or otherwise, commit less crime than non-immigrants. We've mentioned this study before. White nationalist-ish Tucker Carlson was thrilled to cite it without citing any of the studies before or after that disprove it.
We've got the data now, and it turns out, surprise, surprise, they've been lying to you.
Yeah, we have the data now, Tucker. The study comes from John Lott, a controversial economist who's had his methods and data questioned a myriad of times, and who at one point created a fake persona to write articles about how great his research is. But Charlie, no matter what your feelings about immigrant crime are, the facts don't back it up. And I'm sorry, but to coin a phrase, facts don't care about your feelings. Here's some more news. Remember that white nationalist I mentioned who got reelected and who Congress should maybe address his white nationalism? Well, speaking of white nationalists, Tucker Carlson. Wait, this feels familiar. Speaking of white supremacy, Tucker Carlson. Okay, well, I've toned it down to white nationalist, so you're welcome, Tucker. I don't want to engage in inflammatory language or anything, because here's some more news I insinuated. Tucker Carlson's home was protested a few days ago. While he was on the air and his wife was home with their kids, they apparently shouted for him to leave town because they know where he lives. And I would say that this is perhaps not a good look and helps Tucker's cause. Not because Tucker Carlson shouldn't be protested. He should be. But maybe not his wife and kids at home while their shitty dads at work, because Tucker Carlson is very good at what he does, being a fascist propagandist, and he'll use it for his own benefit. The incident is already being investigated as a hate crime. You know how a Swanson heir and one of America's most watched news people is a protected class? Trying to break into a black church, then going to a Kroger, running into a white guy saying whites don't kill whites, then killing 2 black strangers at the Kroger? Not a hate crime. A little shouty at the guy? Hate crime. And Tucker Carlson is already lying about it, successfully, for his own gain. He said people threw their bodies at the door when reports indicate they knocked a few times. He said they attacked the door with such veracity that it cracked. the millionaire's front door, despite that not being mentioned in the police report. Tucker also claimed that someone was caught on camera saying they were going to bring a pipe bomb to his house. Except the video shows them shouting, "Pipe bombs! Synagogue victims!" on account of the pipe bombs being sent to many people's homes, on account of, perhaps, the president's constant targeting of specific people during his traveling dark carnival of amusing horrors. Here's Tucker Carlson laughing at the idea that the president talking about George Soros influenced anybody.
Donald Trump runs around.
No, because George Soros.
Don't laugh.
A plus, Tucker. The protesters also shouted synagogue victims because Tucker Carlson constantly stirs up fear about immigrants all the time on his show and the rest of his channel, specifically about the migrant caravan full of criminals funded by somebody. And a man shot up a synagogue because he thought George Soros was funding the migrant caravan. Oh, and speaking of, leading up to the election, the president and the stupid media wouldn't shut up about the dangerous migrant caravan thousands of miles away, to the point where the president sent the military for Operation Faithful Patriot to deal with it. So it's been a few days since the midterms. What does the president or frightened media have to say about it? Operation Faithful Patriot is now just called border support, and the president wants to ban people from requesting asylum and nothing else. Cool. Anyway, Tucker Carlson, a man who blames Maxine Waters and the left for their violent rhetoric, and who blames Obama's rhetoric for dividing the nation, can't fathom that his or the current president's words have any effect on anybody. But Tucker Carlson is now a victim of fictional door violence. And now reasonable civil media figures can come out and say, "This is abhorrent. I condemn this. This is not who we are," without telling the rest of the story. Stephen Colbert can say, "This is bad. Don't feed the monsters," while smiling, laughing, and pointing with monsters. Jake Tapper and Brian Stelter condemn this dangerous incivility, but they don't seem to add any attempt at communicating context to their audience. Neither of them added anything about Tucker's lies and own incitement of violence, and how his website, The Daily Caller, has a history of doxing people themselves, or how Tucker Carlson lies about people on his show who end up getting death threats themselves, or how Tucker Carlson's The Daily Caller has a history of employing literal white supremacists, one of whom was Jason Kessler, who organized the Unite the Right rally, the rally with all the Nazis who ended up killing a woman. And Tucker Carlson has a history of disseminating the talking points and sentiments of white nationalists and neo-Nazis, some of whom were at the Unite the Right rally looking to kill people. And Tucker Carlson claims that he's just asking questions, and he actually cares about the little guy and important issues like automation. But even when he talks about automation, it always comes back to blaming immigrants somehow. And he always talks about the immediate negatives of immigration without mentioning the overwhelming long-term positives, even after they're explained to him. And Richard Spencer loves him, and white nationalists love him, and neo-Nazis love him because he's helping them, and 4chan loves the work he's doing in terms of pushing the civil war they all crave. And I could actually go on and really unpack who Tucker Carlson is and how somebody needs to explain to his face what he's doing in the unlikely case that he doesn't know. And I will do that eventually. But there's not much time left here, since everything I've talked about in this episode basically happened on the same day. So but people like Jake Tapper and Brian Stelter, who unfortunately are definitely not watching this, maybe you could tweet it at them or something, are failing us when they understandably condemn this type of action, but don't address how Tucker is misrepresenting it or explain who he is and what he does and how he weasels out of it.
Racist!
They're failing us. Jake Tapper and Brian Stelter, stop failing us in pinpointing and reporting on all of this stuff. If you condemn it, which, yeah, you also need to be seriously thinking about how you can effectively and meaningfully communicate to your audience that Tucker Carlson talks like a neo-Nazi regularly. Expose him, like Congress should expose Steve King. Get Tucker Carlson to tone it down, civilly, good sirs, if you don't like what protesters do. Because this is all they can do. Or maybe now he will tone it down after what happened. I mean, Richard Spencer cooled it after getting punched in the face while talking about Nazi stuff. And maybe scaring his kids while he's at work isn't the best move, but protesting him to his face and letting people know who he is and what he does is great. I don't know, f*** your door, Tucker. Let's check out one more time what you think about a bomb being sent to George Soros.
Donald Trump.
So I guess it's weird that Jake Tapper and Brian Stelter didn't add all of that to their tweets. Because Tucker Carlson regularly spouts white nationalist talking points that are almost verbatim what self-avowed neo-Nazis and white nationalists say on camera. Like, diversity is not our strength, immigrants make everything dirty, they carry disease, they commit more crime, they're destroying our culture, English should be our official language, and you need to build a wall, and so on. But Tucker doesn't say, and it's because I'm racist. He doesn't say, because I'm a white nationalist, so it's okay. Tucker Carlson had racist Steve King on his show to talk about threats to culture and nationalism and protecting Western civilization and our babies being, had by foreigners to replace us. And Tucker Carlson said he agrees with him and he's probably right about everything. So maybe that should be examined. Maybe Steve, immigrants are dirt King, and Tucker, immigrants make our country dirty Carlson, and Donald, shithole country's Mexican rape wall Trump are similar. Maybe there's a reason racists love them and appreciate them talking about the stuff racists care about. It's also important to acknowledge what's coming for us and how much people will struggle. So in addressing climate change, climate and carbon and emissions and infrastructure are all important words, but so are food and water and shelter and widening the safety net during a tumultuous time of transition. It's necessary. But it wouldn't be very fair or balanced or even TM, or dare I say C, or certainly R of me, to not address the following.
Why would we ever pay people who are, quote, unwilling to work?
We never would, right? And AOC has never said anything like that, right? I think you're referring to some sort of document that some doctored document that somebody other than us has been circulating.
This isn't true, and I'm so sorry, but it's not. The guy who's not Tucker Carlson is not telling the truth. There was a meme that went around some right-wing circles that talked about drinking your own pee, and that's true. But the economic security for those unwilling to work was real. It wasn't in the Green New Deal resolution, but it was on the fact page for the Green New Deal. It was sent to NPR. It was an overview. That page has since been removed, but it existed. And you can say it was an exaggeration, or you changed your mind, or it was a mistake, or you think it's good and then put forth your argument. And actually, since this interview, it's been clarified that this was a draft. Obviously, the phrase doesn't appear in the actual resolution, but, it wasn't an official thing. But don't say it didn't happen. It did. Also, since we're here, Tucker Carlson can go expletive deleted himself. Here's some news. Tucker Carlson can eat shit. Whoa! If you say so, Tucker can eat it. The poo. In like a bowl or something. Or with a ladle. Slurp it all up. And that's just what the paper says. And you might be saying, hey, dude of news, cool your jets. Does Tucker Carlson really deserve to eat all of our poops? To which the paper says, and thus I say, yes. I will support this wild, inflammatory claim with the following video you are watching, which, and I'm so sorry about this, is going to be entirely about Tucker Carlson. Again, I apologize. I'm sorry for a lot of things that have happened so far. And it's easy to simply write Tucker off as one of a long line of right-wing propagandists, which that's a lot of what he is. But to be fair and balanced, my slogan and no one else's, Tucker is also a white nationalist propagandist. Currently, he is the host of Tucker Carlson Tonight and editor-in-chief for the Daily Caller, two outlets one could spend literal hours pointing out the falsehoods of. But we're mostly not going to do that. And we're mostly not going to talk about how often he regularly spouts white nationalist talking points and how white nationalists openly love him for it. Instead, we're going to run off the assumption that everything I've already said about Lil Tux is something you, my beautiful, beautiful viewer, already suspected. I'd much rather talk about the evolution and life of this formerly bow-tied ruffian and potential future poop eater so that we could perhaps understand him better. It's the Ballad of Liar Tuck. Gather, ye children, start a small fire around your computer and roast a delightful treat as you hear my tale. Much like a Tolkien-esque adventure, I am going to start at the end. Picture in your mind's eye a storybook slowly getting closer, the pages magically opening to one perfect moment.
But you're not part of the solution, Mr. Carlson. You're part of the problem, actually.
But can I just say,
You're all like, oh, I'm against the globalist elite, blah, blah, blah. It's not very convincing, to be honest.
Why don't you go yourself, you tiny brain, and I hope this gets picked up, because you're a moron.
So first we have Tucker Carlson, the Tuck Man. Tucky Tum-Tums, completely losing dignity and control after Dutch historian Rutger Bregman points out that Tux is an obvious and terrible liar who scapegoats immigrants for billionaires. Then, 1 month later, this happened.
She seems awful.
Yeah, she is awful.
They're very
She seems extremely.
I like to hear that word out of. Oh yeah, I stepped over me. She seems what? Now go ahead.
She just does seem a little. Yeah, I mean, you said it. I'm just agreeing with you. I don't use that word because
right. I'd love for.
That's from a clip you've no doubt seen from Media Matters, who resurfaced a series of crude interviews between Tux and an adult human man called Bubba the Love Sponge, where Tucker defends a rapist, as well as makes a long list of racist and sexist comments he seems to think are funny. He also talks like a predator about a teenage beauty pageant contestant and suggests that adult men f***ing girls is probably bad, but adult women f***ing boys doesn't count as rape and is good actually. It's quite possible even more things like this will come out by the time this video is released, but the audio all adds up to a deeply unserious and toxic depiction that forced the T-Dog Snarlson to give an impassioned anti-internet mob retort on his own show.
The great American outrage machine is a remarkable thing. There's really not that much you can do to respond. It's pointless to try to explain how the words were spoken in jest or taken out of context, or in any case bear no resemblance to what you actually think or would want for the country. You must pretend this is a debate about virtue and not about power, that your critics are arguing from principle and not from partisanship. Why are the people who considered Bill Clinton a hero lecturing me about sexism? We've always apologized when we're wrong, and we'll continue to do that.
So, firstly, I've always considered Bill Clinton a rapist. Bill Clinton, rapist. Secondly, it's pretty fun that Carlson accuses his critics of pretending to argue about principle instead of partisanship. The idea being that internet outrage culture is secretly about faking a moral stance in order to attack your political enemies. Because this is clearly something that Tucker Carlson would never do, and certainly hasn't built his entire television persona around.
I've worked in newsrooms my whole life, but that one word that she used, I don't know any man who uses that word.
Well, Tucker, it turns out you know at least 2 men that use that word. But hold on, you say. His comments were a whole half a decade ago. Surely we can't attack this man for some naughty things he once said. Otherwise, we're no better than the people who went after the likes of James Gunn or Dan Harmon. Even the head of Media Matters was discovered to have some old blog posts that he claims to be satire, and those are... yeah. But libs, I mean, do you want everyone fired for everything they've ever said? And here's the thing about all that. Shut up about all that. Because anyone disingenuously using that argument is ignoring the fact that nothing from these Media Matters clips is different from anything that Tucker Carlson says on his show right now. It's just wrapped up in a less vulgar package. Tucker claims it's pointless to try to explain how the words were spoken in jest or taken out of context, or in any case bear no resemblance to what you actually think or would want for the country. Tucker, you say this stuff all the time. Even the stuff about female teachers f***ing their students and shit. He says that like as recently as slightly more than a year ago. A news anchor who reports current events and his opinions to 3 million people who want his opinions talked about how Iraqis are semi-illiterate primitive monkeys. Side note, Tucker, before the Iraq War, Iraq's literacy rate was higher than some US states. You racist. He's on state TV talking about immigration and foreign policy. And to act like any of this is somehow removed from the context of his career is it's just not worth anyone's time. Or at least any more time than I've already spent on it, which was too much time. So enough about what he has said. Let's talk about what he does. We're going to break down just one of his segments about those aforementioned immigrants to see just how totally not terrible he is. Just one segment, I swear.
For Democrats, it's understandable because the calculus is simple. Having abandoned the concerns of the middle class here, they need millions of new voters, and they need them fast. Otherwise, their party risks becoming a permanent minority. Replacing ungrateful citizens with obedient immigrants is their only hope.
At exactly 1 minute into the video, Tuckums has claimed that the Democrats' only motivation for supporting DACA, or the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, is that more immigrants get them more voters. He offers absolutely nothing as evidence, so a reasonable person might assume that the rest of the video is designed to support it. You know, like if you started a video by saying a specific person should eat poop, you would then need to spend the rest of your video explaining why, which I still intend to do. But Tucker never intends to explain why. He's essentially starting with a speculative conclusion that's laughable on its face, and then just moving on, as if it's now true. So, okay, Tucker, what is the next fact for us?
Every Democrat who's thought it through for even a minute knows this well. They can't say it in public, though, because obviously it's horrible. So instead, they're trying a new talking point. Illegal immigrants are terrific people, every single one of them, far more noble and law-abiding than you are. How dare you complain about their presence? You must be a bigot. The one problem with this line of argument is that it's vulnerable to facts.
Now we're nearing minute 2, and Tucky Tumsbo claims that Democrats and liberals will scream bigot at anyone who disagrees with immigration, despite the cold hard facts saying that immigrants cause more crimes. He then cites a study seemingly proving just that.
In the border state of Arizona, for example, illegal immigrants commit 2.5 times as many murders as American citizens do. They're almost 50% more likely to be in gangs. They commit more armed robbery and more sex crimes against children. Overall, they're about twice as likely to be convicted of crimes of all kinds, non-immigration related. And that's just in one state. So John Lott, who's a researcher, a social scientist, got a hold of the conviction numbers, which the government of the state of Arizona has hidden from the population because it's lying to the population about the effects of immigration, as you know.
Now, if the name John Lott sounds familiar, that's because we literally just did a video debunking his study. This study that Tucky Carbo is citing, which is inaccurate, and made by a weird fraud who peer reviews his own work, which is largely created for conservative talking points. And there's a bunch of other studies that have shown immigrants to be equally, if not less, prone to crime as the rest of America. But again, I literally just did that already. So go watch that other video I did. It's fantastic. The main takeaway here is the study that Tuck Everlasting is referring to is bad and wrong. And it's going to be the entire foundation of his segment. And this is mostly how he operates. He starts with a bold lie or inaccuracy that his audience doesn't have the time or desire to fact check or learn the nuance of, and then he builds a bigger lie from that. It's like a magician saying there's nothing up his sleeve, and the audience thinking, okay, magician, I trust you, magician. Whatever you say, magician.
In California, an illegal alien named Luis Brasamontes murdered 2 police officers.
So next, he immediately follows up his wrongness with a single story about the worst immigrant criminal he can find, using it to ramp up anger via anecdotal evidence while ignoring literally everything he previously said about the importance of facts. He then establishes the idea that liberals are letting these immigration crimes happen because of a foolish and emotional idea that diversity is our strength. Except, I thought it was because of the votes, Tucker. What the f***, Tucker? But what follows after that is the gooey center.
Is it true? The less we have in common, the stronger we are? Is a marriage stronger when spouses have radically different beliefs? Are you closer to your kids when you share no common points of reference? Do you speak the same language as your best friend? Could you be best friends if you didn't? These are important questions, given that our leaders are radically and permanently changing our country wholly on the basis of their faith that diversity is, in fact, our strength.
Now, let's break that one down. Because the fact that Tucker Carlson can't imagine being friends with or in a marriage with someone who has different beliefs as him, or in the same town as someone who speaks a different language, it's pretty telling. He's either saying that because he A, truly can't imagine a universe where he could psychologically handle diverse thought, or B, he's trying to appeal to specific viewers who can't imagine being friends with people from other cultures. Racists, that think Tucker is one of. Also, in terms of immigration and America, it's a colossally batshit point because, well, personal relationships and marriages aren't the same thing as a country with millions of people, Tucker. What the f***, Tucker? Oh, it's a false equivalence designed to hook scared old people who don't like things that are different from them. I see. Now, in fairness and balancedness, T. Carl clarifies that he's not actually talking about race, and is therefore not a racist.
Don't the left lie to you. That doesn't mean we have to look alike. Doesn't mean we have to come from the same places. It does mean we have to share common beliefs. Otherwise, we'll hate each other, and the whole enterprise will fall apart.
You see? It's not about your race. We can have all of the races, even the bad ones, as long as everyone in America shares a common belief. We all need to think the same, apparently. Look, I don't know, Tucker. I'm trying to be fair and balanced here, and I guess you could argue that maybe you're just talking about like broad ideals, like freedom of press and speech, respecting each other, but I don't know, man. For one, then why did you bring up common frames of reference and language? And for the second thing, it sure does say illegal alien crime in huge letters behind you while you're talking about it. So... But, lucky for him, he keeps it so vague that every one of his viewers can plug in their own specific religion or belief. So ultimately, he's not saying anything beyond a broad justification for people to reject the idea of diversity in immigration. He literally has zero facts or coherent points. And in fact, Tucker, when you went to Twitter to defend your dumb as f*** things you said, you repeated them. Quote, "How precisely is diversity our strength? Can you think of other institutions, such as marriage or military units, in which the less people have in common, the more cohesive they are?" Yes, Tucker. In fact, studies on the effects of diversity literally cite the military. It makes teams better, more innovative. And while it can make some teams inefficient in the short term, quote, "Scientists have found that the very friction inherent in bringing together a group of individuals with different worldviews is what causes them to work harder, think more deliberately, and learn how to communicate more effectively." Literally, the military, Tucker. In fact, Tucker, here's you debating your views at Politicon, and it's before or after you are explained to your face once again about low immigrant crime and the benefits of immigration, and you mention Robert Putnam.
And there's a lot of study on this. Robert Putnam at Harvard, who's hardly a right-winger, the bowling alone guy, has done a lot of really interesting study on this. Again, he's a liberal, but an honest one, and he's like, people, when they feel threatened, when things have changed too much, they get really angry and tribal, and they don't trust other people, and civic institutions collapse, and we're seeing this across the country.
Putnam is cited a lot by people like Tucker because his study says that in the short term, diversity makes people hunker down and be more tribal. But they never bother to point out the literally second sentence of the abstract. In the long run, immigration and diversity are likely to have important cultural, economic, fiscal, and developmental benefits. Going on to describe illustrations drawn, quote, "from the US military, religious institutions, and earlier waves of American immigration." They, and Tucker, also don't point out that the author himself has described his study as being distorted, and his, quote, "extensive research and experience confirm the substantial benefits of diversity, including racial and ethnic diversity, to our society." And ho, we must not forget the only statistic you even tried to give is based off an incorrect study by this self-peer-reviewing weirdo who once made sock puppet accounts to defend his weird self-peer-reviewed incorrect studies. Hey Tucker, remember how you just said this thing about those things you said?
We've always apologized when we're wrong, and we'll continue to do that. That's what decent people do. They apologize.
So, can I expect that apology from you about how you're wrong about everything I've said so far? I'm on the Twitter, which you're kind of like a soft Nazi. I'm sure you love Twitter. So hit me up, brother, for you to administer that apology. The last half of Tucker's already incredibly wrong segment of lies is when he brings on a guest, a council member of Phoenix who supports DACA. Phoenix being a city in the state that Bull's Poop John Lott study was about. As painful as this will be to watch, it really explains why that Bregman fellow from earlier could push Tucker's buttons so easily. Because Tucker is actually terrible at debate and relies completely on bombarding guests that are too polite to handle his absurdity.
So if bringing in more people illegally and making them citizens makes you more prosperous, then why wouldn't you bring in 10 million and become really, really rich? So how many is the optimum number? If bringing in people illegally and giving them citizenship makes you more prosperous, what's the number, the ideal number of people we should give citizenship to?
Our country and our community was built by immigration.
Okay, you're not
and we
the
have
answer.
so many stories
Okay.
in this community.
So I know stories, but
Yeah, person who supports immigration, give us an exact number of humans that would equal economic prosperity. If you can't give an exact number, then I, a really smart person, win. Why won't you answer my totally reasonable question? Also,
I'm looking for facts, and I think it's fair to ask for facts.
F you, Tucker. F your nose. The exchange ends with Tucker grilling the woman on that good study of his from before, prompting her to explain that the crime statistics she has seen from Phoenix don't support his conclusion. Because again, it's a false study. She answers his question twice, says that the numbers she personally saw don't coincide with the study he's citing because, again, false study, but instead of acknowledging her, he just keeps repeating the question over and over. And when she refuses to repeat herself a third time, old Tucker Carlson declares victory because he's a very good debater. And that's the secret to his expert tactics. He shouts lies at a more serious person, and when that person tries to answer with any kind of nuance, he calls them the real liar. The woman doesn't have crime numbers in front of her and probably doesn't want to ignorantly assert something. Tucker, on the other hand, has no problem assertively vomiting torrents of vomit and can therefore be quicker in the moment, declare a victory, and not worry if he's wrong later. Or he flat out ignores their answer and moves on too fast for viewers to notice. He's profoundly disingenuous with how he discusses these topics, often blatantly contradicting himself.
Most immigrants are nice.
Sure, Tuck. That's what you think. You nailed it. That's the secret of Mr. Tux. He's already decided that immigrants are bad and is now finding the pieces that will fit his narrative, which I hope I'm not doing. But it doesn't matter what topic Tucker talks about. He always brings it back to immigration, automation, Amazon, the family unit, even your old limp penis, or your family unit.
More than 1 million new immigrants enter this country every year legally. A large but unknown number come illegally. Most of these are low-skilled. All of them are looking for work. These new rivals compete primarily with the very Americans most likely to have lost their jobs. And the effect is lower wages. One well-regarded study released last year found that when men's wages fell relative to women's, families didn't form. According to the authors, a falling male wage reduced, quote, the attractiveness of men as potential spouses, thus reducing fertility and especially marriage rates.
To Tucker, when you get down to it, everything is the fault of immigrants, and every solution to a problem involves fewer immigrants. And if someone calls him out for being a racist, something he is, well, he's already decided that it's just a tactic from the left who don't want to hear all the facts. He's cherry-picked. It's this facts versus PC culture stance almost constantly applied to an anti-immigration stance. That's probably why Nazis love him so much. And, his general racism.
Iraq is a crappy place filled with a bunch of, semi-literate primitive monkeys.
Did you know that? About how much Nazis love Tucker Carlson? I mentioned it in passing earlier, but they super do. They love him and what he talks about, and he parrots their talking points, and he sounds like them when he talks about the things they want him to talk about. But
I don't ever speak in dog whistles.
Oh, good. And I could talk about this a lot. I could talk about how if Nazis and fascists think that your show in particular is helping their cause, and that after mass shootings, media is advised to not broadcast the shooter's face or views to avoid spreading their message or creating copycats, maybe after a shit-posting far-right white supremacist fascist terrorist kills 49 Muslims on a live stream because of white genocide and birth rates. Where have I heard that before? Well, maybe don't show his face, Tucker. Or share his manifesto, Tucker, and then use it to foment fear about the rising authoritarian left. Maybe don't highlight the Nazi and his beliefs on your show that Nazis love. Unbelievable, man. And sure, I could talk about that, but that's a bummer, actually. So at least for now, today, what I'd much rather do is expand into the larger question of what exactly happened to Tucker Carlson. Like, how does such a terrible person come to be? Was he birthed like this? Did he suffer some kind of soul injury? Was he bitten by a radioactive swastika? I'm not the first person to ask this, as a profile by Liz Lenz ventured to pinpoint his exact metamorphosis. It is a harrowing read that I highly recommend, and it points out that a lot of Tucker's media colleagues seem to agree that he did change since moving to Fox News. You can even see evidence of this, such as this clip from the 2009 CPAC, where he actually defends the New York Times as a legitimate news source.
I'm merely saying that at the core of their news gathering operation is gathering news. And conservatives need to do the same. Yes, they are liberal. Yes, they twist it, but they are still out there finding the facts and bringing them to people. And conservative, you can believe it or not.
Only to be booed for trying to say that conservative news should be more like the news. And we're going to circle back to that moment because it explains a lot. But my point here is that while Tucker has always been a conservative, he didn't appear to be the same person 10 or even 5 years ago. He was seemingly less angry, less toxic, more bow-tied. Well, unless he was on Shock Jock Radio, apparently, something we are now discovering. But there's a reason we didn't notice those appearances all those years back, mainly because he wasn't such an overt racist when actually running his main news show. Over on MSNBC, he'd actually engage in polite debate with the likes of Rachel Maddow, actually coming across as a moderate conservative.
Here to debate that, Air America radio host Rachel Maddow joining us tonight from New York. Rachel, welcome.
Hi, Tucker. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you. I am convinced this is a subject in which decent people can disagree. In fact, I know, because I know decent people who are on both sides of this question.
He was on Dancing with the Stars. And while he was really bad at dancing... he was also a really good sport about it. He's been to over 50 Grateful Dead concerts, and he once wrote a piece idolizing Hunter S. Thompson. So, what happened? Or did anything even happen? His hate ramblings to Mr. Sponge seem to indicate that Tucky didn't change nearly as much as we might think. And this is the point in the Ballad of TC where the screen goes all wavy, and we flash back to a little Tucker, to when his birth mother left his family when he was 6 years old to practice a bohemian lifestyle in France. According to Tucker, it was a totally bizarre situation that he never talks about because it wasn't a big part of his life. Yep, his liberal bohemian mother walking out of the family when he was 6 years old totally didn't inform his life in any way. His father then remarried Patricia Carolyn Swanson, an heiress to the Swanson frozen food fortune, meaning that Tucker, the boy who totally wasn't affected by his liberal bohemian mother, grew up in extreme wealth. And we'll get more into that later, and it will be great. But cut to his learning years, and Tucky was sent to a boarding school on account of being, and this is according to his own words, not very good at school. He then became head of the debating society because you don't need to be good at school or know much about anything to be good at arguing, a statement that we should all be painfully aware of by now. According to a 1999 Washington Post article profiling Tucker, he once strode to the edge of the stage and challenged any member of the faculty to debate him on any subject. Because of course he did that. Of course he did that. According to The New Yorker, Tucker was later accepted into Trinity College despite having poor grades because he was dating the daughter of his school's headmaster. He then tried to join the CIA and failed because he wasn't any good.
Is college still worth it?
By all accounts, Tuvok Carlsbad wasn't too shabby at print journalism. But then he shifted to television in the 2000s, and things got...
Stop. Stop hurting America.
Okay.
How old are you?
35.
And you wear a bow tie.
Do you like lecture people like this? Or do you come over to their house and sit and lecture them and, you know, they're not doing the right thing, that they're missing their opportunities, evading their responsibilities?
If I think they are.
Ugh. I wouldn't want to eat with you, man. That's horrible.
I know, and you won't.
Things got pretty grim for Tuck. Shortly after being disassembled by Jon Stewart on his own show, Tucker was let go from CNN and moved to MSNBC, where he lasted a few years before once again being let go for low ratings. This was the time in which we see those more moderate clips of Tricky Handstand, and also when he gave this 2003 interview with the Washington Post, where he called Fox News, and this is a direct quote, "a mean, sick group of people," after the network, and this is totally real, doxed his wife and kids. Fox News doxed Tucker Carlson, and at the time, Tucker was outraged that they would put his family in danger. Man, that's like poetry. It's poetry. For everything Tucker Carlson has ever said, somewhere there's, well...
And they were threatening my family to get me to stop talking. And obviously I'm not going to because it's my job to talk, and I have the support of Fox News, and I'm grateful for that.
Anywho, 2003 was the same year that Tucob had an interview with Salon, where he not only said that it would be hard to imagine him ever working at Fox News, but also criticizes the demagoguery of folks like Bill O'Reilly and the use of straw men in the national discourse. All while using the word retarded like way too much. But then, after repeated rejections from more centrist and left-leaning news organizations, he held his nose and took a job at Fox News in 2009, not long before starting the Daily Caller. This was, as you can probably remember with your brain, right around when Barack Obama was elected the president. Tucker was now 40 years old, having spent his 30s being bounced around networks. It's not a stretch to imagine that he was ready to settle down. Or, in his own words,
Rupert Murdoch, I've got to give him credit. When you talk about media conglomerates, he really knows what he's doing.
Yes.
He is smart.
He's very smart.
Really smart and tough.
You're his bitch.
I'm 100% his bitch. Whatever Mr. Murdoch says, I do.
Gee, it's almost as if he secretly has no standards at all and doesn't actually believe in anything and kind of knows that and is therefore joking about it. Like, obviously this interview from 2010 is meant to be a little bit in jest, but have you noticed that everything Tucker claims to be a joke has that funny because it's true vibe in his voice? Like, when he's not hosting his show, every other interview seems to be him ironically talking like a monster and flat out saying that he's a Fox News puppet. Because he knows that's what he is and thinks it's a real hoot. It's almost as if, I don't know.
You're doing theater when you should be doing debate.
Yes. That's it. Thank you, John. Along with being the year Tucker officially announced his bitchhood to Rupert Murdoch, it's also when he begins the not-so-mysterious change from asshole conservative to racist Trump mouthpiece who tries really hard not to talk about Trump specifically. Because along with marking his hiring by Fox, Obama's presidency also marks a big shift in the network itself. Now, this is an entirely different deep dive, but if you're really interested, I highly suggest you read this 10,000-word New Yorker article chronicling Fox News' transformation from a conservative news channel to the closest thing to state TV America has ever seen. Some highlights include the ideological shift from Rupert Murdoch being vocally pro-immigration in 2015 to the acceptance of Trump's "they're criminal rapists" narrative not a few years later. It's the story of a network that once canceled the likes of Glenn Beck for his conspiracy mongering and is now more than willing to float the idea that the DNC killed a man. That reprimanded Sean Hannity for attempting to appear at a Tea Party fundraiser, only to later ignore it when he does the same for Trump events, Trump being the president. It's the epic tale of a network that routinely swaps staff with the Trump administration, speaks privately with the president, and gets special treatment during press events. A network and company that, when attempting to sell its assets to Disney, got no pushback from the Trump administration, despite that same administration trying to block other competing media mergers. It's really dark stuff. And I know it's a lot of words, but you should really read it and maybe do something about it. Like all of us maybe do something about Fox News? Because the shift I'm describing is not conservative. It's exclusively pro-Trump. And you can see this in the nightly work of Tucker Carlson.
The spectacle of illegal immigrants separated from their children at the border has ceased to be a news story in any traditional sense of the term. It is now an event, a kind of competition in which elites vie to see who can reach greater heights of rhetorical excess and self-righteous posturing. It is performance art, really. On Facebook, Senator Ben Sasse called the administration's policy wicked, as in immoral and devilish. Former First Lady Laura Bush likened it to the internment of the Japanese during World War II, a moral stain upon this nation.
Yeah, can't you believe these liberal elites like Ben Sasse and Laura Bush and their outrage for Trump's practice of child detention? And sure, f*** Laura Bush and Ben Sasse specifically, but Tucker fans will identify this as him being fair and balanced, not his slogan, and he often presents himself as a centrist on his show. His main target? The rich elite! You see, just like Trump, a millionaire hotel owner, Tucker is a man of the people. He's down in the trenches, calling out the upper crust who are pitting the working class against each other with race baiting and partisan politics. He doesn't answer to one party, he's just calling it like it is. If that happens to coincidentally coincide and support all of Trump's anti-immigration policies while demonizing his opposition, well, that's a coincidence.
So she doesn't want other people using planes, but she'll use a plane going back and forth between D.C. and New York because she's important. It means she's the ruling class. She's powerful.
Exactly.
She's important. So she gets to do these things. But for you and me, we're just, the serfs along the way.
Little racist Tucker fighting for us. The serfs, like him. He's also that thing. Let's all unite with him. A serf. The person definitely not also elite and also race baiting and playing partisan politics.
Divided countries are easier to rule, and nothing divides us like the perception that some people are getting special treatment. In our country, some people definitely are getting special treatment. Republicans should oppose that with everything they have.
See? It's easier to control people by dividing them. And the best way to divide them is to say that some people are getting special treatment. Also, some people are definitely getting special treatment, and you should be mad, and Republicans are the only people who can stop it. Now that's from a particularly insane and rambling segment that, as promised, I'll try not to dwell on. But I do need to point out that it starts with him talking about how poverty in rural America is a growing concern in what appears to be a thoughtful premise, only to somehow blame the problem on women in the workplace and weed smoking.
In many areas, women suddenly made more than men. Now, before you applaud that as a victory for feminism, consider some of the effects. Study after study has shown that when men make less than women, women generally don't want to marry them. A huge number of our kids, especially our boys, are smoking weed constantly. You may not realize that because new technology has made it all but odorless, but it's everywhere. And that's not an accident. Once our leaders understood they could get rich from marijuana, marijuana became ubiquitous. In many places, tax-hungry politicians have legalized or decriminalized it.
Now, I've never smoked weed before, but I just want to point out that yes, everything he's saying is a lie, and that marijuana use among teens has been the lowest in 2 decades. Also, lawmakers didn't legalize it on a whim. It's something we voted for. And I don't know, maybe the reason he's blaming women and pot and rambling about how the American family is dying is because Fox viewers are super old and out of touch and want to complain about their grandchildren.
Try having dinner with a 19-year-old who's been smoking weed.
Yeah, I bet they'd rather be listening to the Grateful Dead, Tucker. But again, I'm not going to repeat what other articles fact-checking this video have already said. I mostly want to focus on this.
For our ruling class, more investment banking is almost always the answer.
Are you paying attention? According to Carl Tuckson, the problem is the elite ruling class, the investment bankers who care more about foreign charities than supporting the working man. You good so far? Now this.
And more to the point, who's going to pay for that? Not the people you've been watching on television today. Their kids go to private school if they have them. Their neighborhoods look exactly like they did in 1960. No demographic change at all, just like they like it. There's no cost to them. The cost is entirely on you.
So again, his enemy, the people to blame for illegal immigration, are the elite trying to divide us on national television while hidden away in affluent neighborhoods, putting their kids through private schools. Meanwhile, Tucker, the serf, is simply telling it like it is, man. He's one of us, just a regular schmo with a television show who's downgrading his $4 million home in Kent, D.C. for a $2 million one. Just a regular guy living in a rural neighborhood with 4 times the national median income, struggling to put his 4 kids through private schools. Just a normal Joe whose mother was an heiress, growing up and going to school in not 1, but 2 castles. Little Lord Tucker and his brother Buckley schooled in castles, folks. Like a couple of non-special Harry Potters.
How do you pay your bills?
Well, I'm like extraordinarily loaded just from like money I, inherited from my number of trust funds.
From the Swanson.
I told you this. Yeah, totally.
Once again, it's funny because it's true. Also, fun fact about the Daily Caller, that awful news site he runs, its biggest investor is Foster Freeze, not that one, a wealthy mutual fund manager who is well known for giving to international charities. He's literally funded by banker elites giving to charity overseas. That thing he's saying hurts the country. Because the hilariously transparent thing about Tucker is that he pathologically rallies against the exact thing that he is.
You are a millionaire funded by billionaires. That's what you are.
That's it. That's the thing. He's an obvious fraud, and a racist, and a liar. All things you probably already assumed. So what happened to Tucker Corporal Stan? Did the seemingly resolute conservative just bend to the will of Fox News when it shifted to be more pro-Trump? To answer that, I'd like to go all the way back to his decision to move from print journalism to television, as described by his own autobiography. Quote, I was heading back to my desk with a takeout hot dog one afternoon when I ran into the receptionist. She asked me what I knew about the OJ trial. My instinct was to answer honestly, just about nothing. But for some reason, I caught myself. I asked her why she wanted to know. Well, she explained, Dan Rather's booker just called looking for an OJ expert to go on 48 Hours tonight. Everyone else is still at lunch. Can you do it? Within a few hours, I was on my way to CBS in New York. And there it is. Tucker saw an opportunity to be special, brushed off the fact that he was completely ignorant, lied about his qualification, and then plowed ahead despite having no clue what he was talking about. Him getting booed at CPAC in 2009? Most likely, it signaled that he would have to push farther right to be more popular. And so he did that. For money. In other words, he's just what's the phrase?
Your partisan, what do you call it, hacks.
Yes. Thanks again, John. A colleague of mine. Tucker is just a kid who applied to the CIA and then fell back on journalism. And Tucker did do a good deal of reporting in his early years, but finding the truth was never his passion. He just wants to be popular, have a job, and make money. And he doesn't care what he has to say or do or who he hurts to get that. Had he killed it on Dancing with the Stars, I guarantee he would have just done that instead. He's not like an impressive guy, and honestly, he doesn't deserve our attention or an entire video devoted to him. But because he somehow failed his way into a national spotlight and sucks, we have no choice. And maybe he should just go away. Or at least eat it, Tucker. Eat the poop. You actually don't get the ladle anymore. Sorry, you gotta do it with a fork, holding the plate close to your mouth like you're slurping linguine without a napkin. Slurp the spaghetti, Tucker. It's not outrage mob culture to point out that he's a liar and a racist and sexist and homophobic, and for those reasons should definitely not be in charge of the news. He's not an entertainer like James Gunn or Roseanne Barr. He's a f***ing news anchor who is watched by 3 million people and therefore responsible for informing his giant audience about everything from foreign policy to popular culture to immigration. And he's on the record joking that Iraqis are semi-illiterate primitive monkeys and mocking an entire gender of people with palpable contempt. And frankly, whether he was joking or how long ago he said these things have no business being debated. His flaccid challenge for people to come on his show is just more gaslighting and pretty much the epitome of everything we've just talked about. He lies so often on his show that I'm genuinely wondering why we can't have a law against professional news anchors purposefully misleading the American people, which is, it's kind of fascism. Like he's making me want to do a fascism against him because he's so frustratingly and obviously grifting a large portion of America and no one is doing anything about it. And like maybe he'll stick around forever. And he shouldn't. But in the meantime, if you ever get the opportunity to talk to him on camera to his face, show him this video or like paraphrase it or say your own thing. My point is that people should go on Tucker Carlson's show and describe his show to his face more often because he does not like it. Come up with your own thing, make a game out of it. Or maybe she's unaware of new TPUSA hire Benny Johnson, formerly fired from BuzzFeed for a lot of plagiarism, eventual and former writer for the white nationalist-friendly website The Daily Caller, owned by Tucker Carlson, who we won't be talking about today. Benny Johnson opened up a recent TPUSA event by saying this.
Yes, look at this. This is amazing. Oh my God, I've never seen so many white people in one room. This is incredible.
Rock and roll, everyone involved in this situation. Also, as we were filming this, the official Turning Point USA Twitter account shared a photo where one of its members promoted the Kalergi Plan, an anti-Semitic white nationalist conspiracy theory. Weird. Because the thing is, white nationalism and white nationalist violence is on the rise, according to all of the serious people at this hearing, according to the racist FBI, according to the freaking military, according to our own fucking eyes. And having Candace Owens come lie about it and put on this weird conservative YouTube grievance nonsense is grotesque. White nationalism is...
What does that mean exactly, and what's the agenda behind saying it? And most important, what's the effect on the country when they repeat that again and again and again? Does it make us a better place, or does it make us hate each other?
I said I didn't want to talk about you today, you fancy boy. That, of course, is Tucker Carlson, a white nationalist propagandist, complaining about people calling others white nationalists, despite self-described white nationalists loving his show because of all the white nationalist talking points he regularly espouses. In this exact same episode from this week, he later talks about American birth rates and rising foreigner birth rates and how we must protect our birth rates. This is an issue that was central to the Christchurch shooters manifesto. Great replacement of white people due to birth rates. We're looking at this early and still have options. There's a recent study published in the journal Nature that showcased a range of ways we can course correct depending on the severity of need. Called the Great Food Transformation, the spectrum outlined everything from changes in technology all the way to eliminating consumer choice, that latter being something we could avoid if we come at this with a cool head. Or we can all be a bunch of little Tucker Carl bums about it.
Listen, we gotta address factory farming. Maybe we shouldn't be eating a hamburger for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Like, let's keep it real.
Slow down. Let's keep it real. Maybe we shouldn't be eating hamburgers. I mean, it's wild. Or driving cars or using appliances or having a middle class.
Yeah. How dare that horrible woman suggest we maybe not eat hamburgers 3 times a day and by extension try to destroy the entire middle class is clearly what she was saying there. Thanks, Tucker. You're fucking terrible. King and the President and even Trucker Carburetor regularly talk about immigrants being dirty from shitholes, making America dirty, in some cases calling them dirt. And we have a right to defend our borders from invasions. All of these people and statements are beloved by white nationalists, by the way, because of course they are. Remember when we pointed out that Tucker Carlson is a racist? Well, that's still true.
Ilhan Omar is living proof that the way we practice immigration has become dangerous to this country. A system designed to strengthen America is instead undermining it.
Cool. Also, real recently, after spending years fear-mongering about invasions of immigrants invading the country and changing our demographics and spouting white nationalist talking points and being regularly praised by neo-Nazis for it, well, a guy did a terrorism about an invasion of immigrants. And the next day, Tucker was like, white supremacy is a hoax. And now he's on vacation. So, maybe he should stay there.
How shocked are we that 17-year-olds with rifles decided they had to maintain order when no one else would?
Tucker Carlson, dipshit face, asks, how shocked are we that a 17-year-old crossed state lines armed with an assault rifle that he was legally too young to own and went out and killed 2 protesters after he, Tucker McNear Swanson Carlson, and his network obsessively fixated on the threat to the suburbs from BLM and Antifa terrorists, spending hours displaying violent imagery in the month leading up to the shooting to represent these protests, despite studies showing that 93% of the protests were entirely peaceful, including messaging that running over protesters is okay and good. But somehow, he doesn't feel compelled to ask the same question about why people might be protesting in the streets following a never-ending string of police killings, or the fact that the police used force in over 54% of the demonstrations in which they engaged. Because as we have noted on this show, these riots have largely been police riots. Yes, even though Abraham Lincoln made racism illegal in 1862, and then LBJ made racism double illegal in 1964, weirdly, racism seems to still exist. And not just the on-the-nose, Proud Boys marching around with their loser Confederate flag, cosplaying in their desert camo in urban environments way. See, the pandemic is hitting black and brown communities hardest, which seems weird because the coronavirus itself can't be racist. Unless, an improvement, honestly. South Carolina Representative Caesar McKnight, a Democrat, argued on Tucker Carlson's program of fascist propaganda written by 5th graders that his support for a bill banning gender-affirming medical care for trans kids was out of concern for children. Quote,
I don't hate anyone. What I'm about is protecting children. And I think that in South Carolina, you have to be 18 years old to get a tattoo. So how is it that you can get an irrevocable procedure performed on you at any age during your adolescence? It's ridiculous.
The Voice's editorial decision. He doesn't actually sound like that. The new concern about trans people is that doctors, parents, and children are going to make terrible, irreversible decisions about the child's health by getting gender-affirming treatment. In fact, the cover of the 2020 book, Irreversible Damage, The Transgender Craze Seducing Our Daughters, seems to imply that the child's entire midsection would be surgically removed. At any age! So some guy said on Tucker Carlson's consistently accurate and fact-checked show. Christopher Rufo is a right-wing reactionary activist, failed politician, and self-proclaimed investigative reporter who rapidly found himself rise to prominence as a countervailing force to the nationwide protests that took place in response to the public lynching of George Floyd and so many others in the summer of 2020 by sensationalizing, misleading, and outright lying about what was happening in diversity training programs across the country. He described the diversity training program conducted in the city of Seattle as cult programming, and claimed that critical race theory has become, in essence, the default ideology of the federal bureaucracy and is now being weaponized against the American people. To prove this point, he asserted that the Treasury Department had hired a diversity consultant who told Treasury employees, essentially, that America was a fundamentally white supremacist country, and, I quote, virtually all white people uphold the system of racism and white superiority. Now, it turns out these claims were not entirely accurate. I mean, it sounds like something I might say, and probably will say before the end of this episode, but according to the 33-page document that Rufo provided to support his claims, it's clear that, at best, he was recklessly distorting the nature of the program. But more likely, he was outright lying about it. So, of course, he quickly found himself on Tucker Carlson's show.
You know, Tucker, this is something I've been investigating for the last 6 months, and it's absolutely astonishing how critical race theory has pervaded every institution in the federal government. And what I've discovered is that critical race theory has become, in essence, the default ideology of the federal bureaucracy and is now being weaponized against the American people.
The morning after this appearance, Rufo was called by Donald Trump's chief of staff, Mark Meadows, who told Rufo that the president saw your segment on Tucker last night, and he's instructed me to take action. According to the Washington Post, the reaction to Rufo's appearance that evening on Fox News was swift. The next day, Trump demanded action. 2 days later, his budget chief issued a memo laying the groundwork for the federal government to cancel all diversity trainings. An executive order followed, and Rufo was invited to the White House a few months later for a meeting. In other words, it's just people making blind claims so many times that it becomes common knowledge for anyone who wants it to be. So now we have Tucker Carlson casually referring to Fauci as the guy who created the virus like that's an established fact.
They take it from the guy who created COVID. Watch this.
Why am I even debunking this? This is like putting salt in the ocean. The local conservative radio hosts, the low-level GOP officials, people who are spreading misinformation on a smaller scale while actually practicing what they preach. They are, by far, the hardest people to reach because, as I mentioned, they tend to not believe a thing until it is actually happening to them. And even then, maybe not. They are both the butt of all of our jokes about COVID deniers and the most tragic examples of them. Tier 2 is when things get pretty f***ing insidious and can be summed up with just one person.
Good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson Tonight. Here's a very simple question. How many Americans have died after taking the COVID vaccines? That's not Americans who've been killed by the virus. That's a huge number. It's how many Americans have died after getting the vaccines designed to prevent the virus. Do you know the answer to that question? Do you know anything about the downside? We know a lot about the upside of vaccines. We've been completely in favor of vulnerable people taking vaccines. But what about the potential risks?
What about the risks of the vaccine? Asks Stucco Cargo Zooms, a man who is definitely vaccinated. Much like how 90% of all Fox Network staffers are vaccinated because they are required to be. Tucker spends most of his time questioning the vaccine, despite being vaccinated, because it's what his audience wants. Because, and I don't know if you know this, Tucker Carlson is a lying grifter with a ton of blood on his hands. He says he tries not to lie, despite his entire career being built on a lie, and the rest of his career being made of many lies. He says punching down on vulnerable people is the worst thing a person can do while spending hours demonizing homeless people. Also, you know, all the vaccine stuff. He should face consequences, and by no means should we feel empathy for people like him. People using their substantial platform to spin stone-faced lies that will result in the deaths of anyone who listens. To put this in, like, really low bar terms. Even Ben Shapiro has told his audience to get vaccinated, albeit among a bunch of other bullshit that undermines it. But folks like Tucker are just about as low as you can get, and exposing them might be a way to convince those at Tier 1 to perhaps change their mind. And Putin himself is still using misinformation and half-truths to his advantage, and is even being aided by right-wing media in the US. But I wonder who could be doing that.
In fact, the U.S. Embassy in Kiev has acknowledged joint American and Ukrainian research on other pathogens, such as hemorrhagic fever virus. Apparently, there's a lot of this going on in Ukraine, funded by the United States. Did you know that? Why Ukraine? We don't know. We can only guess.
Oh, grand. Except that we don't have to only guess like Turbo Shartson is saying. We know that there are bio-research labs in Ukraine and around the world being funded by the US, and that many of these labs are doing research on pathogens. And while it is fair to ask questions about their safety and necessity, it is flat-out propaganda to suggest without any evidence that the ones in Ukraine might be secretly developing bioweapons to use in tandem with the US government, when again, there are labs all over the damn world that do this. But look, this segment is not about trumpet balling, friends. We're not here to give him 4 Pinocchios or 6 George Costanzas or 12 Jim Carreys in the first act of Liar Liar, but that claim that the US and Ukraine are working jointly on bioweapons labs was rapidly amplified by him after it emerged in relative obscurity. It appears to have started with the since-suspended Twitter account War Clandestine, who mused hours after the invasion started that Putin was likely targeting biolabs in Ukraine, and tied this to the conspiracy theory spread by the Russian disinformation apparatus that the US had bioengineered the novel coronavirus in a lab. That musing by literally some guy made its way around QAnon-connected social media, then to InfoWars, and ultimately to Tucker Carlson, and unfortunately, your eye holes and earballs. A Kremlin memo from early March and published by Mother Jones highlighted the bioweapons conspiracy theory, featuring the same bullshit talking points highlighted by Tucker Carlson, and encouraged state-friendly media outlets to frequently use segments from his show. That's what leads to clips like this, where Russian subtitles appear under Tucker for broadcast on state-controlled media outlet RT. And I don't know, if a state-sponsored propaganda outlet, not just from Russia but like anywhere, started using clips of this show to make its argument, especially if that country had just illegally invaded another country, I would take a look at what I was saying and why I might be politically aligned with anyone and doing propaganda for someone cluster bombing residential neighborhoods, a thing I would like to make clear right now that I am against. It just seems like Tucker Carlson should, if he were an actual person with feelings, want to walk into the ocean in immense shame, is my point. Anyway, America's relationship with China is a constant subject of conversation in the media, and no one knows exactly what to say, including me, but especially this guy.
Meanwhile, in China, where the coronavirus originated, a top advisor to the Chinese government declared that the country was experiencing a very different kind of threat, a more profound threat. The problem, he said, was a national masculinity crisis. Chinese boys, quote, have been spoiled by housewives and female teachers, and they were becoming, as a result, quote, delicate, timid, and effeminate. In essence, they were becoming people who might listen to someone like Tony Fauci.
What the hell are you talking about, Tucker? Is this what your show is always like? Just a rambling of bizarre misconceptions about what it means to be masculine?
Once a society collapses, then you're in hard times. Well, hard iron sharpens iron, as they say, and those hard times inevitably produce men who are tough, men who are resourceful, men who are strong enough to survive.
Oh, right, I guess it is. My bad. Hey, wowee! Whoa, another episode of Cody Comps, the name of the thing you watched. Be sure to stay tuned for more episodes of Cody Comps, where I talk for more than an hour over the span of years about a subject of a person who sucks. And you know what? Click that bell. Ding ding! For YouTube reasons. That's the internet noise. It's not. I tried. Not very hard. Thanks!